Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is our GASB 87 implementation working session 1, where Peter and I will cover the Deloitte LeaseController Payable Lease Template. Everyone should be muted by default and have their video off. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box and we'll answer it as soon as we can. This working session is being recorded and will be posted to the OSC webpage at a later date. So you go ahead, Peter.
Okay, welcome everyone. As we mentioned in our training last week, LeaseController is a third-party software developed by Deloitte to record and store lease data and assist BFR in recording the necessary accounting entries to comply with GASB 87 for quarterly and annual financial reports. It's a web-based platform where agencies will complete Excel templates and email them to BFR. BFR will then upload the templates and calculate the appropriate account entries based off of your inputted values. All leases over the materiality threshold that are not OGS managed will be added to LeaseController quarterly. In these templates, you'll be asked a series of questions about the lease, including general information, lease terms, and rental payments. And you're asked to make reasonably certain determinations on any options or clauses that are included in the lease. There are 3 different types of templates that will be provided. One when the agency is the lessee, one when the agency is the lessor, and one for any material modifications that may occur. So I'm going to open up the Excel template and give me a second.
So just to note too, while we're opening the template here, the template does contain 181 data input columns, and while that's going to sound and look overwhelming at first, I just want to remind everyone of a couple things. The first being a large portion of these columns will not pertain to most, if not all, of your leases and will be left blank. Not every column is mandatory. The second thing being materiality will significantly reduce the number of leases you'll need to put on the template. A reminder that being $300,000 annual exchange of value for leases prior to 2/1/21 and $100,000 annual exchange of value for leases after 2/1/21. And then also New York State reporting entities will likely only be completing, 3 or 4 leases at most each quarter for the process going forward. So while this looks like a lot, the amount of work that will go into it shouldn't be too bad, especially if you know the underlying details of each lease agreement. Also a reminder, all OGS managed leases are not being input on these templates. OGS will input their leases that they manage for other New York State reporting entities into SFS separately. So with all that being said, and just again, a reminder, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box today. Peter will go through the template in detail.
Thanks, Corey. So what we'll be going through today is the Lessee template, which I assume most leases that will be entered into LeaseController will be. Revenue leases would be the lessor template. And then, as I said, the third template will be if you have any changes to the lease during the lease term that will materially affect the calculation. So this template that we have is a draft template, which we'll be sending to you shortly. We are still working with Deloitte on a New York State tailored template. When the final template is released by Deloitte, we'll let agencies know that's available on our website. When we send this draft template to you, you can go ahead and start inputting information. Just make note that when the final version is available, you would just have to copy and paste row 11 into the final version. We don't anticipate any material changes to the template, more just the way it looks and how it flows. So hopefully when the new template, the final template gets uploaded, we'll just be able to take this row 11 and copy and paste into the final template. So just going through, again, as Corey mentioned, this is a web-based program. So normally you'd have an interface and go through and answer every questions, which if there's one or two agencies, we might do that. We might have done that, but with all the agencies being involved or potentially involved, we want to provide an Excel based template, and we will be able to review the template and upload it into the program, and get back to you if we have any errors or anything like that. So just to get started on this one, we'll go through question by question. A lot of these were left blank, so hopefully we can get through this and it won't take too much time. But the first question, your lease ID. This is going to be your procurement contract or your New York State contract ID. Most of the time you'll see it start with an L. For the lease type, next question, since this is a lessee template, you're going to put lessee for all your entries. And as we go through, I'll mention some of these. I've put in example entries for this template, but for the draft template, there will be some pre-populated answers, whether it's yes or no, and you can change them based off of what pertains to each lease. But if we see a question where 9 out of 10 times it's going to be no, or it's going to be leasee, we'll leave that. Would be pre-populated, and it's up to you guys to change it if necessary. Lease description. We just want a quick little blurb about what the asset is that you're leasing. If here we're leasing, it's a 5-year lease for office building in Albany, New York. If you have equipment, put what type of equipment it is, how big the lease is. So that's beneficial for you and for us to just, before we get into the details, we kind of know what we're dealing with, what kind of asset we're dealing with. Next will be your legal entity, your SFSGL BU. After that is leased asset classification. And if you look up in row 9, you'll see verbiage in blue. These are things we've added to it, so it will help you out to answer a particular question. So a lease asset classification, you may not know what that is, but we're telling you to enter one of these 5 values. Is it real estate, vehicle, equipment, other leased asset, or private partnership? So in this instance, we're putting real estate. Does this contract meet the definition of a lease under GASB 87? This will always be yes. If it doesn't meet the definition, it shouldn't be entered into this template. So that would always be yes. Here it's just if no, please explain why. You won't be able. You don't need to enter anything in here. And just as a note, anytime it's blank, leave it blank. Don't put NA. Don't put non-applicable, because that may create an error when we're validating, or when you're validating this template. So leave it blank if the answer is not required. Number 8, asset ID, leave field blank. Store ID, leave field blank. And these, when if you're asking why are some of these on this if we're leaving it blank, these are Deloitte basically creates a template for anyone who wants to use LeaseController, and then they'll specify it for for New York State. So some of these may come off, but most likely they will stay on, and we just leave them blank. So again, this goes into a lot of these questions. It's either going to be left blank for many reasons. Next question: does this lease trigger a construction period involvement? We haven't ran into this clause many times, if any, so it's going to be defaulted to no. If you do have one that has a construction period involvement, please reach out to us and we can discuss further. This is just a question. If you do have a CPI involvement, it just adds to give some context to the clause. Next question is 12. Is this lease with an intercompany entity or a third party? This will be defaulted to third party. Intercompany within New York State, that would be agency to agency, and that would not be determined to be a GASB 87 reportable lease. So this will be third party for any of the leases that you're entering into this template. This will be left blank because we are never going to have intercompany entity. So here we get into kind of the details of the contract, the lessor name, who you're renting the building from, ABC Corp, their address. This is where they it should be stated in the contract, the vendor address, Central Ave, Albany, New York. Vendor ID.
Peter,
Yep.
just real quick before we move further. So we had one question: does third party mean a lease not directly with, for example, a landlord? So for third party for us would be any kind of outside source landlord that the state is working with in order to lease something. The intercompany portion would be intergovernment or with another agency, which wouldn't apply on this, as Peter had said. So sorry, I just wanted to answer that. We can move on.
Sure. And yeah, feel free to I'm kind of going through these kind of quickly, but feel free to jump in with questions, and we'll answer them as we go or at the end. So this enter vendor ID from the contract, this should be stated. This is the New York State ID. This should be stated in the contract or supporting documentation. Language of the lease, number 17, most likely is going to be English. I think this will be defaulted to English. Is this lease cancelable? And this is whether it's cancelable by the leasee or the lessor. You'll answer yes or no. Does this lease contain restrictions or covenants, for example, those relating to dividends, incurring additional financial obligations? Yes or no. Again, a lot of these, questions cover a wide variety of topics or clauses where most likely you won't run into it, but we want to have these available if you do see something that's, I would say, out of the ordinary or that you won't see in leases before, that you put yes, then we'll take the next steps to determine what needs to be done. Enter value, upload template. This is always going to be upload template because we're not gathering information from another system. It's going to be hard coded into this template. Here, comments. This is a free text box for additional information you may have. This can be for your value, or for if you want to put additional things to remember each lease by, and I'm sure it would be helpful to us as well, but you don't have to enter anything here. Next is the address location of the asset, the building that we're renting, 110 State Street, country, city, zip code. And then Corey, you want to jump in with the original lease commencement date?
So we have the difference between the next four columns is we have the original and then the current dates for the lease. So there may be something, an event or something, or delay in implementing and taking control of the asset in the lease. If there was an original agreed upon date in the lease before it gets pushed back, those are going to go into 28 and 29, the columns for the original lease agreement date and the original lease commencement date. The current in column 30 and 31, the current dates there would be the ones the lease actually takes effect, and those are the dates you'll input in those columns.
Okay, thanks, Corey. So, most likely you're not going to enter anything into the original lease agreement date or commencement date. But if you do, that's where it will go. And current lease agreement date, lease commencement date, if everything goes smoothly in the negotiations, you're going to put the date commences. And just for your knowledge, we are putting, these are not just leases that are starting after 4/1/22. As we spoke in the previous trainings, some of the leases that were in effect as of 2/1/21 are going to be put into this template, and they could have started, 2015, 2018. So it's if you are inputting a template or told to input a lease, it should not be just ones that commenced after a certain date. So for this one, I put it starts January 29th, 2019. Just to go back. Number 30, this is the current agreement date, which is the date that the lease was signed. or the contract was signed and made valid. So this was January 29, 2019. The actual lease started on February 1st, 2019. And then the current lease end date is the end date of the lease term, and this is 5 years later, ending on 2024, January. Is this an evergreen lease? This is going to be no. If yes, contact us. But an evergreen lease basically means a month-to-month lease. If you have a month-to-month lease starting out as the initial lease, it should not be included on, it's not GASB 87 reportable, because it has to be at least a year to be GASB 87 reportable. If you have a lease that, it's coming to its end date, and you start negotiating for the next term, and then the next term, the current term ended, and before you have a lease in place, you start going month to month, contact OSC, because we won't, that's a special determination, but most likely that will end the lease term, and you'd have to create a new one. But if you do in any situation start going into a month-to-month lease, let us know, and we'll guide you through the next steps. So the next 4 to 5 questions in green relate to the month-to-month. I won't go into every single specific question, because it'll be rare that you'll have a month-to-month as the initial lease. Now we're getting into options and clauses that will require, if you do have these options, it will require you to make a reasonable certain determination. So the first option we're running into is, does it contain a purchase option? I'm saying no. If you said yes, they would ask for the purchase amount, option amount. Is this considered a bargain purchase option? Was the earliest purchase option date as per the lease contract? And any comments. So this is all related to, if you said yes to a purchase option, you would answer these 4 questions. And then it's going to ask you, is the lessee reasonably certain to exercise this purchase option? If you say no, we're still requiring you to answer all these questions regarding the details of the purchase options. If you say yes, that will affect your potentially affect your payment schedule, and how many months. It may cut it short. It may change the calculation. So if you do have a purchase option and you are reasonably certain to take that option, put yes here, and then we will, we'll walk you through what needs to be done in terms of the payment schedule. Again, these are a couple questions. If you say yes, this is asking you, what date are you expected to exercise it, and expected payment for a purchase option. So I don't know how often this will come into play. I assume it has to do with equipment, things of that nature, but it's something to keep in mind for the options clauses that I think you will more come into play are the renewal options or the termination options, where like the purchase options will. I think it'll be rare, but again, keep in mind if you do have one. If you do have one, you still have to provide the information, but put no. We are not reasonably certain to purchase this this piece of equipment. If yes, we'll take it from there. So another option we're speaking about: does the lessor, this is the landlord, have the ability to terminate the lease? We're saying no, so we're not answering the next 3 questions. If yes, you have to answer the next 3 questions, one being the expected date of exercise of the termination, and is there a penalty if the option is exercised? And again, here is your reasonably certain determination. And we've spoken about reasonably certain many times during training. When you make this determination, you should have some I guess backup information as to why you came to that determination. So we may ask you, or the auditors may ask you down the line, okay, you put no for this. There is a termination in the option in the lease, but you put no. we don't expect that to happen. You'd want to have some sort of backup documentation, whether it's white paper or something in your files that say why you believe it will happen or you believe it won't happen, just for down the line an auditor could ask why was this option taken, why wasn't this reasonably certain, give me the walk through your methodology. So keep that in mind when answering yes or no to an option that you have in any of your contracts.
We have a question real quick, Peter.
Sure.
So the question is, our leases are managed by OGS. Will they be completing these spreadsheets on agency behalf? So for OGS and all OGS managed leases for New York State reporting entities, they will be inputting and taking care of those leases and putting them on the SFS system, which will be separate from this template in LeaseController. This template is for all non-OGS managed leases that New York State reporting entities are entering into and conducting themselves. And this will help us account for those separately.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, as Corey mentioned, the OGS managed, and that is key, we keep in mind of how many, there's a lot of questions here, but how many leases are you gonna run into every quarter? And then how many of those are going to be OGS? And then if you have a question as to whether they OGS manage, let us know, and we can compare the list of OGS leases to what you have, and determine whether it needs to be included on the template. And then so how this template works is we upload this into the program, and then every quarter we're going to close the books, and by the end of the year we're going to get accounting entries that we are going to put into SFS. So as Corey mentioned, the OGS leases will be calculated for GASB 87 purposes, will be calculated in SFS, but any leases that are managed by agencies outside of OGS will be input into LeaseController, and then at the end of the day we'll have the accounting entries that will be uploaded into SFS. Thanks for that question. The next question is, does the lessee, so this is the agency, have the ability to terminate the lease? Yes or no? We're putting no, but if you say yes, and this is just that they have the ability to. You're not, if you have a clause in your lease, but you don't think you're going to take it, you still put yes here, and you put the terms of the clause, and then you make the reasonably certain determination here. So again, the information is required if there is a clause in the lease. 53 or 54 are based off if you're saying yes to reasonably certain to exercise this option. Okay, so does this lease contain a renewal option? This I can see, potentially agencies taking advantage of, as opposed to the termination or purchase options. But again, anything can happen in any of these leases. So the question is, yes, does it contain a renewal options? I'm saying for this lease, I'm saying yes. So if you say yes, it says enter the renewal option details on the renewal options tab. So for renewal options, the questions that will be asked are on this tab down below, the renewal options. And here it's just asked for the lease ID, the renewal options in length, and then the renewal options in month. And then here's your reasonably certain question. Is the lessee reasonably certain to exercise the option of this lease? If you say yes, it will affect the payment schedule. So we'll get into the payment schedule later, but this is renewal options is the only option that has a separate tab down here where you just put the additional information. Okay, lease currency, or I assume it's going to be US dollars, but again, if you see something differently, you would put in here. The payment period, and this is an important question because this will determine, we'll go into the payment schedule. The payment schedule is going to ask you amount per period. It doesn't say amount per month. It doesn't say annually. So this will run off of what you put into this cell. most of the leases we've seen are monthly, but they could be annually, quarterly. So just make sure you're putting monthly here if those payments are being provided monthly, because that will run off of this payment schedule we'll get into later. The next question. Select the payment date. Is it due at the beginning of the payment period or at the end of the payment period? It should be stated in each lease. So we're getting into the interest rate portion. And again, when we've spoken prior trainings, why is the interest rate important? This is what will be calculated when we calculate the present value of the asset or the liability that will go onto the balance sheet for New York State. We don't expect, there are, from the standard, it says sometimes a lease or a contract will have an implicit interest rate stated in the contract. We have not seen that, but again, keep your eyes open. But most likely it's going to be not stated, so you're going to put 0 here, and we will be calculating the incremental borrowing rate for the calculation of the lease asset and liability. So unless it's stated in the lease, don't put anything. I put 0 in here, and don't worry about the incremental borrowing rate, because we will calculate that on our side. This is implicit interest rate or IBR rate on the transition date. Put 0 for that. This is asking if there's an exchange rate, if there's a lease currency. Just put 1 for that, so it's a 1-to-1, and the same for this question, 1. And when you're inputting this, there's a validate button that will, so if you forget to put a 0 or forget to put a 1 or any of these, you forget to put something in that requires an answer, it'll let you know that this question needs to be answered prior to uploading. All right, so these are questions related to this question. So most likely this is going to be, actually take that back, prior deferred rent balance that needs to be amortized as part of the rent expense. This I've rarely seen. I would leave blank unless you see something in the contract that speaks to this. Other adjustment to the asset, leave blank unless you see something that speaks to it. And these are comments if you have any adjustments to the asset. Question number 66, were lease incentives received? So this is, I guess you can see, where you'll get a cash payment for signing a lease, something like that. I don't know if we'll run into those in New York State, but keep an eye out for it. Answer no if no. If yes, for whatever reason, we'll ask for the incentive amount, and are any of them deferred? So again, although going into these questions where I assume you're rarely going to see it, keep an eye out for it, and leave blank if it's not required. Any initial direct costs that were incurred on the lease. I don't know if we'll run into these, but it says initial direct costs are costs that are ancillary charges necessary to place the lease asset into service. These may include admin costs or structuring fees. I don't think we'll run into this, but if you do or see something similar to it, reach out to us and we can determine whether it's initial direct cost or not. These are questions related to it, not necessary if you press no. This is related to it, not necessary. Was there an installation and delivery fee paid? We haven't seen that, but again, keep your eyes open. If yes, they'll want the installation fee, because all these questions may or may not affect how the asset and liability is calculated. So it's kind of like you guys are providing us the information, we'll determine if it affects the calculation. So there's no need for you on your side to subtract it from a rental payment or things like that. But it's just, if you see something, let us know and we'll determine what to do with it. Is there any security deposit or prepayments associated with the lease? Yes, no, and then answer the questions following it. Is there a disposal or removal fee? Again, yes, no, and let us know the fee amount and the discount rate. You can contact us and we'll figure that one out. Is there a penalty or fee upon returning the leased asset? Yes, no. Answer the following two questions. Is there a residual value guarantee? Yes, no, and answer the following 4 to 5 questions. Does this lease include an asset restoration obligation? And an asset restoration, I had to, some of these things, give us a call and we can walk you through if you know what an asset restoration obligation is, or if you have, you don't know what a residual value guarantee is. If you see something in your lease that speaks to it, let us know and we can walk you through it. But again, if it's not included, no, and no need to answer the following questions. Does this lease contain a non-index based escalation clause? So Corey, were you going to jump in on this one, or?
I can, yeah. So for this specific column, if your lease includes some kind of escalation clause for its rent, we're looking for a yes or no here. Whether that be, something in the contract regarding a 2% increase every year in rent. So if you have that in the contract, you would answer yes here so that we know it exists. And there's also a tab at the bottom that you'll input both non-index and index escalation information in.
Thanks. So the next question is, this lease contain an index-based escalation clause? This is, you may see a lease where the first month is $1,000, or the first year, each monthly rental payment is $1,000. Then the second year, it'll increase based on LIBOR or the consumer price index. So at this point, you don't know what those rates will be. But if you run into a situation that you see that the rental payments are based off a clause, they'll ask you to input additional information on the index escalation clause to determine what goes on the payment schedule. So this is related to that. Is it a CPI escalation? And then again, additional questions. If you do have a CPI-based escalation clause, it'll run through. Again, we haven't seen any, but I'm sure there can be CPI-based escalation clauses out there. So if you say yes, you can run through these questions, or give us a call or email us, and we can walk you through these as well. These are these are all related to the CPI index escalation. Does this lease contain a variable lease payment other than index base? Yes or no. If you say yes, you're answering the next 2 questions. Does this lease contain free rental periods? So sometimes you'll see you sign a lease and it'll say the first 2 months are you don't have to pay the first 2 months. That will affect the payment schedule. So if there is a yes here, let us know and we will help you calculate the amounts that go on the payment schedule. Does this contract have non-lease components that need to be allocated? I mean, what this question's asking, you're going to put no here because a non-lease component is not included in your rental payments. And then we spoke about this in our prior training. What's the difference between a lease component and a non-lease component? A lease component is your rental payment. It should only include amounts that are lease components, which are rental payments for specific use of the property or the asset. Providing utilities, common area maintenance, property taxes, and insurance, those should be considered non-lease components and should not be included in the monthly payment total. They're treated as expenditures and not included in the calculation of balance sheet items. So sometimes you'll see a lease where it'll say you're going to pay $1,000 monthly for rent, and then you're going to pay $100 for common area charges. When it comes to inputting your monthly amounts in the payment schedule, you're not going to include that $100 of common area maintenance. Or if you have a lease that says you're going to pay a percentage of real estate taxes and insurance on a building, those are not considered part of using the asset or specific use of the property. Those will basically be expensed. So I guess as a rule of thumb, when I've read where if you have a lease and you want to determine what's a lease and what's a non-lease payment, think of it, when you own your own house, you pay your mortgage payment, and that's the payment you make every month. But your real estate taxes, your maintenance fees, those are just expenses that go out the door to keep up the house. So when relating that to a lease, it's just the payments that are required for the actual rent of the property or the equipment, not any maintenance or services or additional costs that would have to be paid even if you weren't renting it. So that's kind of a sticking point. But if you have any questions regarding what's a non-lease and lease payment, feel free to email. I know a question we got from the previous training was, are real estate taxes, are they considered non-lease payments? And yes, as I said, they are considered non-lease payments. It should not be included in your payment schedule. Here's describe the non-lease payments. So does this lease contain a fixed in-substance minimum payment? To be honest, I had to Google what this meant. So just the example of a fixed in-substance minimum lease payment is if a lease for retail space requires payments of $1,000 per month, $1,000 per month, or $4,000 per month if at least any level of revenue is earned. So let me say that again. A lease for retail space requires payments of $1,000 per month or $4,000 per month if at least some small level of revenue is earned. So say you're renting space out in a mall and it's $1,000 your rental payment. But if you sell 5 shirts and now it's $2,000 per month. Basically, it's saying in reality that's a fixed amount, the $2,000. I don't think we're going to run into any of these in New York State, but that's basically what a fixed in-substance minimum payment is. It's something that doesn't sound like it's fixed. It sounds like it's variable, but it's going to be fixed more ways than not. But again, I assume we won't run into this. But if you do, reach out to us and we can discuss further.
I want to chime in real quick.
Sure.
On the other template for the revenue leases, this may be a little more common there. I know I've seen during contract reviews, there were some contracts we had with vendors for the New York State Fair, for example, and if they had a certain amount of revenue of whatever they were selling, then this would kick into effect and they would pay more. So just keep your eye out for those. They are uncommon, though, as Peter said.
Okay, thanks, Corey. And again, this just to reiterate, this is a lessee template. The lessor template will have some other some questions, and we can go over that. And when it's final, or maybe it's a good idea to do another training session for the lessor template as well. Does this lease contain a holdover provision? So holdover provision, as we stated, is you're coming to the end of the lease term on a current lease. And well, this just to take a step back, this is if this holdover provision is included in the lease that you're in the current lease. So you may have a lease that says, I'll read it right here. The lease contract may provide that after the lease term, if the lessee does not vacate the lease premises or does not deliver the leased asset back to lessor, then a holdover rent will be required to be paid by the lessee. Populate yes if such clause is in the agreement. So this is if it's in the agreement. We've seen some leases where the lease term is coming to an end and both the lessee and the lessor, they agree that they're going to extend the lease, but with negotiations with the state and a third party, it takes a little longer than they wanted to, and all of a sudden the lease term's over. And then they go into a month-to-month holdover period. That, unless it's stated in the lease or the contract, you would put no here. But if you go into that holdover period, and we've stated this in prior trainings, that ends, that is no longer, the lease no longer becomes GASB 87 reportable. So your current lease term ends, you go into a holdover period for 4 to 5 months. That no longer is a GASB 87 reportable lease. Once the new lease is signed with new terms, then we treat that as a new lease and calculate off of those new terms. This, if you do have holdover payments in the lease, enter the terms here. Again, a question about related party, I guess, to the holdover. This is going to be no. We don't want to. We're not going to see any related party leases. Same with 117. Does this lease have any specific tax rate that differs from the entity tax rate? I don't see this coming up that too often, but again, if it's yes, let us know. And then the following questions go into the tax rate, the lease specific tax rate. Let me see. So this is a lease, part of a sale leaseback transaction. And if you see that, yes, more likely than not, it's going to be no. Has any part of this lease been subleased? Yes or no. Does this lease have associated leasehold improvements? So if the lease agreement allows the lessee to construct improvements on the lease asset, then populate the response as yes. If you do, we can walk you through if anything needs to be adjusted. Does the lease transfer ownership of the asset to the lessee by the end of the lease term? I think this you'd see more in equipment leases. Yes or no if you see that. Any comment? 126, economic life of the asset. Corey, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so under GASB 87, we're required to account for the lesser of economic life of the asset that's in the agreement or the lease term. So most of the time with real estate and buildings that are going to last a while, this won't matter. But if it's a lease agreement for something that could have its economic life expire during the term, we need to know the economic life in months in order to account for that.
Yeah, so Corey said we don't anticipate the economic life being less than the lease term, but especially with real estate. But for whatever reason, if some equipment, during the lease term, I guess becomes non-usable, but we expect that to be few and far between. This asks if there any payments were made prior to lease commencement. GASB 87 lease classification selected, field left override. This leave blank because this is asking for the lease classification, well, I guess when we went back, I think the fifth question asked is real estate equipment, and there's a couple other options. If you have an option that doesn't fall under one of those classifications, you can put it here. So now for the next 10, and we're getting near the end of it. The next 10 are New York State specific questions that we asked Deloitte to input into the template. And these will all be values that you should be able to find, either in your contract folder or within SFS. If you have any questions as to where to find these, let us know. So they're asking for the procurement agreement start date, the procurement agreement end date, the business unit, the New York State contract ID number, the procurement department ID number, and the fund, the chart of accounts fund that will be the payments will come from. Next question is we've talked about this in previous trainings. SBITA is subscription-based IT agreement, and that falls under GASB 96, which we won't speak to today, but sometimes you'll see a SBITA contract or an IT agreement for for some software, and included in that agreement might be servers, the hardware that run the software, and that might be housed in New York State offices. So this is where we want you to look into embedded leases. If you look at a SBITA contract like, oh, okay, this is not GASB 87, I don't have to worry about it. But we want you to take a second look and say, see if there's any hardware included in those leases that may have to be GASB 87 reportable. And then this is just, is the lease embedded into another agreement? You could have another agreement that's not a lease, but you might have lease-like terms or an actual lease of equipment in an agreement that when you pick it up for the first time, it's not a lease agreement. This is asking for the related agreement. If there is an embedded lease, provide the related agreement. Is it financed by debt? Yeah.
We have a couple questions, Peter.
Yeah.
One was actually somebody stating that the row descriptions don't look right. Those will be fixed if they are incorrect in the next template version as well. These were custom fields, as Peter said, so Deloitte is working to hammer them out for us. So that was one. And the other one is there a list or matrix of the various criteria, i.e. annual amount, term, holdover status, that will assist us in determining which of our leases are subject to this reporting standard? So going back to, we have a new materiality threshold, as mentioned, that was for leases before February 1st of 21 in the original reporting tool inventory that we compiled. It'll be any lease over 300,000 annual exchange of value. And then after February 1st, 21, it's going to be over 100,000 annual exchange of value. If your lease meets those thresholds, then it'll be reportable on this.
As long as it's non-OGS managed, right?
Correct.
And then the next two questions, if it's financed by debt, don't know if we'll see that too often. And then fair market value of the lease asset. These are just custom fields that may or may not go away, or we can add ones as we deem necessary. A lot of blank fields, which again, when the final version is out, most likely will not be reflected. And then the last two questions, the type of lease. You have a gross lease where basically, you're paying your flat rental amount, and then the lessor, the landlord, pays for all those, non-lease charges incurred. So I think most of the time you're gonna have a gross lease. A net lease is what a lessee pays a monthly rent, but it's basically some of the property expenses are baked into that monthly rent, so that would be considered a net lease. And then the index type, this is going back to that question, if you have indexed rate escalation, whether it's LIBOR or CPI. So it says this is a child question to parent question 95. So if you went back to 95, this would be left blank for most leases because they will not be index-based escalations. Okay, so again, we went through all these questions. Feel free to reach out. Any of them I know went through rather quickly. And as you can see, almost half of them are going to be left blank or won't pertain to your lease, but they will be necessary when uploading into LeaseController. So these are the questions that we gather information. The next thing we're going to discuss is the payment schedule, and this is where the financial terms, the rental payments come into play when we're determining the asset, the right to use asset, and then the liability, which will be amortized. So here's if you remember, if we look back to lease details, nowhere here do they ask what your monthly rental amount is or what your annual rental payment are. They ask you if you pay it monthly or at the beginning of the month or at the end of the month, but this is where we're going to put the actual financial terms. So we're dealing with one lease, and again, just going back, you're going to input all the. We do not need a separate template for every lease. So if you say you have 4 leases that you're inputting in one quarter, you can put them all here. You would just add a row. Don't insert rows and don't insert any columns. If you need to add a row to add a new lease, you're going to click add row. It'll ask you how many. I'll put 4. And now it adds 4 more columns. So, and the same for this payment schedule. If you have four leases, you're going to put them all in a row. You don't need a separate Excel template for each lease. So if you remember this lease that we were answering the questions on, it was a 5-year lease, and it started on February 1st, 2019, and ended on January 31st, 2024. If the monthly payments were $1,000 for all 5 years, I would just put, well, let's go back. Here's the lease, and you're going to ask, this is going to be minimum lease payments always. So put minimum lease payments in this column. And then payment start date, I'm putting February 1st, 2019. In this case, this lease has payments that increase throughout the years. But if, for instance, we didn't have any increases and it was $1,000 per year, you'd put the date of the commencement date and then the end of the lease, and then you'd show $1,000. So that would cover the 5 years. But in this case, we have increasing rental steps. So the first one, I'm putting the lease starts on February 1st, 2019. It ends I'm paying $1,000 a month for the first 2 years. For the first 2 years, ending January 31st, 2021, I'm paying $1,000. Okay, then I look at my lease and there's a rental step. So from February 1st, 2021, for the next 2 years to January 31st, 2023, my payment is now $1,200 a month. And then for the final year, February 23 through January 24, it jumps up to $1,400. So like I said, if you have steps, they should have a separate line. You see the lease number stays the same. If you have another lease, you put it here. But you may have one line item for this lease specifically. So you might have 3 or 4. You might have 10, based on how many, how often the rent increases. One caveat I do want to say is if you do have a lease that starts in the middle of a month. So let's say this starts 2/15, 2022, and it ends. Well, I guess if it starts in the middle of the month and it's $1,000, let's say the rental amount is $1,000 per month. For the first month, you'll have to put $500. So through 2/28/22, and then for the rest of it from 3/1/22. So let's say the lease ends 1/31/2024. You would put $1,000 here. So LeaseController doesn't have the ability to prorate the rental payments based off of what you input into the date. So if you do have a contract or lease that starts in the middle of the month, you will have to prorate it and input it as a specific line. So this is just the 15 days, $500, and then for the rest of the term of the lease, it's $1,000 a month. So just keep that in mind when inputting the payment stream.
So we only have a few minutes left. If anyone has questions, please put them in the box and we'll try and get to them before the end of this. I also want to reiterate, because we had a question as well, whether there be a glossary or list of definitions. We are releasing a GFO with some of the significant terms to GASB 87, but if there are any terms in this template that you don't understand, just reach out and we can help explain how to fill them out when it comes to leases. The other thing too is just to give a little background of the process. So as I said, we're hoping that the threshold helps. You'll probably be inputting, I don't know, 3 or 4 leases depending on how many your reporting entity agrees upon in each quarter. After giving them to us in this template, it should be able to validate on the completed template, which Deloitte will be providing, the New York State one we had mentioned. And we'll be using that to put into the website. And as Peter said earlier, that will be able to, we'll compile it and close the books. We'll get accounting entries from it. And we put those into the annual financial reports for New York State. The other thing too, and please reach out if this applies to you, New York State reporting entities could potentially have different boilerplate for their contracts that may affect certain things on this template. If you have anything that's out of the ordinary, please reach out to us. And we can discuss any of those. Are there any questions? Just again, one more time too, because we had a question on the threshold. So before February 1st, 21, the threshold is over 300,000 annual exchange of value. After February 1st, 21, it's over 100,000. So going forward for the quarterly process, the expectation will be to provide all leases agreed upon for those quarters or missed leases from prior quarters over $100,000 of annual exchange of value.
And I think the training, last week's training, will be up on our website shortly. So anything we spoke about referred to the training and trainings for in 2021 as well. Anything that we spoke about were referred to in prior trainings. I should have the ability to check out those trainings and the slides and refresh some of the things that we've been talking about.
We have a question about is 2-1 included? If you have a lease that begins on 2-1, it would apply to the $100,000 threshold. So again, too, this probably looks intimidating with all the columns. Again, we're hoping you won't use half of them for a lot of the leases we've been seeing, the contracts we reviewed. I do want to emphasize the reasonably certain stuff. Definitely make sure that you fill out that stuff because it is one of the most important parts when recording this in LeaseController. And again, any questions, please forward them to us. We can help. We're hoping that the New York State template we'll make it pretty streamlined too. I mean, it's going to look similar, but we're hoping with the descriptions and stuff we have that it'll help at least fill out what needs to go in each column.
So we've reached the end of the hour. There's no additional questions, Corey?
I do not see any. I think we've answered everything. If not, please
the FinRep
email either of us.
Email box. And yeah, we appreciate everyone listening in. And again, we're trying to make this as streamlined as possible. And we'll have another working session next week. The yet to determine, but it'll probably just be an open session where you guys can call in and, you know, answer questions, or if you run into the issues or questions that you have while looking at leases, we can answer them. So appreciate you listening, and thank you.
So we also, the FinRep inbox, we don't have it up on the screen, but it is FinRep, FINREP, GASB, GASB at osc.ny.gov. Again, that's FINREP, GASB at osc.ny.gov.
So this ends the presentation, and thank you, and look forward to any questions you may have in the future.